wife passed away and left me only an old coat. At the inheritance meeting, my son-in-law laughed. That's all you deserve, the $8 million go to me. But inside the coat's lining, I found something sewn in, a sealed envelope. When I read what was written, my eyes filled with tears. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my wife's funeral would become the scene of my greatest humiliation. Standing there in my worn black suit, watching as my daughter Sarah clung to her husband Randall's arm instead of mine, I felt more alone than I had in my 63 years of life. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he prepared to read Ophelia's will. I expected the usual formalities, the house we'd shared for 40 years, our modest savings, maybe some jewelry for Sarah. What I didn't expect was the smirk that slowly spread across Randall's face as Mr. Henderson began to speak. To my beloved son-in-law, Randall Morrison, I leave the sum of $8 million, along with all investment accounts and properties. My knees nearly buckled. $8 million. I had no idea Ophelia had that kind of money. Where had it come from? When had she accumulated such wealth without telling me, her husband of 4 decades? And to my husband, Levi, the lawyer continued, his voice growing uncomfortably quiet. I leave my old winter coat, with hopes that it will keep him warm in the years to come. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt the weight of every stare, heard the sharp intake of breath from Sarah's aunts, the barely contained whispers of our neighbors. 40 years of marriage reduced to an old coat. Randall's laugh cut through the tension like a knife. Well, Levi, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, looks like that's all you deserve. Good thing Sarah has me to take care of her now. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, to ask how my wife could have betrayed me so completely. But the words wouldn't come. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my hands trembled as I reached for the back of a folding chair to steady myself. Sarah looked between us, her eyes red from crying, confusion written across her face. Mom always said Dad would be taken care of, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Your mother was sick at the end, honey, Randall said smoothly, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. Sometimes people's judgment gets clouded. But don't worry. We'll make sure your father doesn't end up on the streets. The condescension in his voice made my stomach churn. This man who had barely tolerated me for the past 15 years was now speaking about me like I was a charity case. The same man who used to roll his eyes whenever I spoke at family dinners, who made snide comments about my blue-collar job, who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that he was the successful one with his fancy marketing position. After the reading, people filed out quickly, their discomfort palpable. I overheard Ophelia's sister Margaret whispering to her husband, "Always knew there was something off about their marriage. Poor Ophelia must have finally had enough." The funeral home emptied until it was just Sarah, Randall, and me. Sarah approached hesitantly, holding a plastic bag containing the coat. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I don't understand what Mom was thinking. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw my little girl again. Not the 35-year-old woman who had slowly grown distant from me over the years. "It's fine, sweetheart," I managed to say, though we both knew it wasn't. I took the bag from her hands, feeling the weight of the worn fabric inside. "Your mother must have had her reasons." Randall stepped forward, his expression a mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. "Look, Levi, Sarah and I have been talking. We know this is hard for you. Maybe it's time to consider one of those nice senior living communities. We can help you find something affordable." The word affordable hit me like a slap. He was already planning to warehouse me somewhere out of sight, out of mind. I clutched the bag tighter and forced myself to meet his gaze. "I'll manage just fine," I said quietly. "Of course you will," he replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Just remember, we're here if you need anything. Within reason, of course." As they walked away, I heard Randall whisper to Sarah, "Don't worry, babe. We'll keep an eye on him from a distance. Can't have him becoming our responsibility." I drove home alone to the empty house that no longer felt like mine. Every room echoed with Ophelia's absence, but now it was tinged with something else. Betrayal. How could the woman I'd loved for 40 years, the woman I'd worked 2 jobs to support while she stayed home with Sarah, the woman I'd held through her cancer treatments just 5 years ago, how could she leave me with nothing? That night, I sat in my recliner holding the plastic bag, afraid to even look at the coat inside. It felt like opening Pandora's box. Once I saw it, once I accepted this was all I had left of our life together, there would be no going back to the illusion that Ophelia had loved me. But as the clock struck midnight and I realized I hadn't eaten anything all day, I finally opened the bag. The coat was exactly as I remembered it. Navy blue wool, slightly faded, with small worn spots on the elbows where Ophelia used to rest her arms when she read. She'd worn it every winter for the past 20 years, claiming it was the warmest coat she'd ever owned. As I lifted it from the bag, something felt different. There was an unusual stiffness in the lining, a small bulge near the inner pocket that I'd never noticed before. My heart began to race as I felt along the fabric, my fingers tracing what seemed to be the outline of an envelope sewn carefully into the coat's lining. My hands shook as I realized that maybe, just maybe, Ophelia's final gift wasn't the humiliation I thought it was. I barely slept that night. The coat lay draped over the chair beside my bed, and every time I closed my eyes, I could feel its presence calling to me. By dawn, I couldn't wait any longer. With trembling fingers and my old reading glasses perched on my nose, I began the delicate process of opening the lining. The stitching was so careful, so precise, that I knew Ophelia had done this work herself. She'd always been meticulous with her sewing, spending hours at her machine creating quilts for church auctions and mending our clothes long after I told her we could afford to buy new ones. As I carefully cut through the threads with her small embroidery scissors, the same ones she'd used for 30 years, I felt her presence in every stitch. The envelope slipped out easily once I'd opened enough of the seam. My name was written across the front in Ophelia's familiar handwriting, the same script that had filled birthday cards and grocery lists for decades. But this writing looked different, more urgent, more deliberate. Inside, I found 3 pages of her careful penmanship, and as I began to read, my understanding of everything that had happened began to crumble. "My dearest Levi," it began, "if you're reading this, then my plan worked, and Randall believes he has won. I pray you can forgive me for what I had to do, and for the pain I know this will cause you. But I need you to know that every harsh word, every cold shoulder, every moment over these past 6 months when I seemed to turn away from you, none of it was real." My hands began to shake so violently, I had to set the letter down and take several deep breaths before continuing. "I discovered something about Randall 3 months ago that changed everything. He has been slowly poisoning our daughter's mind against you, convincing her that you're becoming a burden, that your memory is failing, that you're too proud to admit you need help. But that wasn't the worst of it, my love. I found out he has another family." The words hit me like a physical blow. Another family. I read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. "He has been married to another woman for 7 years. Her name is Jennifer, and they have 2 children together, a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. He keeps an apartment across town where he spends 2 nights a week, telling Sarah he's traveling for business. I have photographs, documents, everything. But when I confronted him, he threatened me in ways that still make my hands shake as I write this." I had to stop reading and walk to the kitchen for a glass of water. My mind reeled as I tried to process what Ophelia was telling me. Randall, the man who acted like the perfect husband, who constantly reminded us how lucky Sarah was to have him, was living a double life. Returning to the letter, I continued. "He said that if I told Sarah the truth, he would have me declared mentally incompetent. He has been documenting every small mistake I've made, when I forgot where I put my keys, when I mixed up the grocery list, when I couldn't remember the name of Mrs. Patterson's new dog. He said he had enough evidence to convince a judge that I was losing my mind, and that he would make sure I spent my final years locked away in the worst state facility he could find." My chest tightened as I remembered those small moments Ophelia mentioned. I dismissed them as normal aging, the kind of minor forgetfulness that happens to everyone. But Randall had been watching, cataloging, preparing to use them as weapons. But he made a mistake, Levi. He got greedy. He said if I wanted to protect you, I needed to make sure he inherited everything. He believed that with $8 million, he could abandon Sarah and start fresh with his real family. He actually laughed when he told me his plan. He said Sarah was getting too old anyway, that Jennifer was younger and had already given him the sons he always wanted. I felt sick to my stomach. My daughter, my beautiful, kind-hearted daughter, was married to a monster who was planning to destroy her life for money. The letter continued. "I knew I had to protect both you and Sarah, but I also knew that if I simply told the truth, he would follow through on his threats. So I devised a plan. I pretended to believe his lies about you becoming a burden. I acted as though I was angry and disappointed in our marriage. I know it broke your heart, my darling, and I'm so sorry for that pain, but I needed him to believe he had won. Tears blurred my vision as I remembered those awful final months. The way Ophelia had started speaking to me with barely concealed irritation, the way she'd brush off my attempts at affection, the way she'd sided with Randall whenever he made his cutting remarks about my age or my old-fashioned ways. I'd thought I was losing her to resentment and bitterness. Instead, she'd been protecting me. "The $8 million is real," the letter continued, "but it's not mine to give away. I've been managing your father's investment account since he passed, and through careful management over the past 15 years, they've grown substantially. The money legally belongs to you, not me. By leaving it to Randall in the will, I've given him enough rope to hang himself." I had to read that paragraph twice. My father had left a small inheritance, maybe $50,000, when he died 15 years ago. Ophelia had insisted on managing it, saying she enjoyed learning about investments. I'd trusted her completely, never asking questions, never looking at the statements she filed away so carefully. "Here's what I need you to do," the letter concluded. "In our bedroom, behind the loose baseboard under the window, you'll find a manila envelope. Inside are copies of all the legal documents proving the money is yours, along with photographs and evidence of Randall's second family. There's also a tape recorder. He doesn't know I've been recording our conversations for the past 2 months. His own words will convict him." The letter ended with the words that broke my heart and mended it at the same time. "I have loved you every day for 40 years, Levi Morrison. I loved you yesterday, I love you now, and I will love you from whatever comes next. Please forgive me for making you doubt that love, even for a moment. Everything I did was to protect you and our daughter. Now it's time for you to finish what I started. Make him pay for what he tried to do to our family. All my love always, Ophelia." I sat in my kitchen chair as the morning sun streamed through the windows, holding the letter against my chest and crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Ophelia hadn't betrayed me. She'd saved me, and now, armed with her final gift, I was going to save our daughter. I found the manila envelope exactly where Ophelia said it would be. My arthritic fingers struggled with the loose baseboard, but eventually it came free, revealing a hiding place I'd never known existed in 40 years of living in this house. The envelope was thick, heavy with documents and photographs that would change everything. Sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where Ophelia and I had shared thousands of meals, I spread out the contents with the care of an archaeologist handling ancient artifacts. Each piece told part of a story that made my blood run cold. The financial documents were overwhelming at first. Investment statements, transfer records, account summaries, all showing how my father's modest $50,000 inheritance had been carefully grown into nearly $8 million over 15 years. Ophelia had been brilliant with money, something I'd never fully appreciated. Every transaction was documented, every investment decision explained in her careful notes. But it was the photographs that truly shattered my world. The first showed Randall leaving a suburban house with a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger than Sarah, maybe late 20s, with blonde hair and a warm smile as she kissed Randall goodbye. 2 small children played in the yard behind them, a boy who looked exactly like Randall, and a little girl with his same dark eyes. More photos followed. Randall at a school play, sitting with this other family. Randall pushing the little girl on a swing at a park. Randall at what appeared to be the boy's birthday party, helping him blow out 6 candles on a cake. In every image, he looked genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen him with Sarah. The documentation was thorough. Ophelia had somehow obtained copies of a marriage certificate dated 7 years ago, just 3 years after Randall married Sarah. She'd found lease agreements for the apartment he maintained, utility bills in his name, even school enrollment forms listing him as the father of both children. My hands trembled as I picked up a small digital recorder. A note in Ophelia's handwriting was taped to it. "Play this, but prepare yourself. His words will hurt, but Sarah needs to hear the truth." I pressed play with a heavy heart. Randall's voice came through clearly. "Look, Ophelia, I'm done pretending. Sarah's getting old, she's getting clingy, and frankly, she's becoming a liability. Jennifer is everything Sarah used to be. Young, beautiful, uncomplicated. And she's given me sons. Not just one daughter who'll probably turn out as useless as her father." My wife's voice responded, shaky but determined. "What about your vows to Sarah? What about the life you've built together?" Randall laughed, a cold sound that chilled me. "What life?" living in this boring suburb, pretending to care about her little teaching job, listening to her talk about having more kids when I already have the family I want with Jennifer. The only reason I stayed this long was because I knew there was money in this family eventually. And now, with you helping me get it, I can finally be free. And Levi? Ophelia asked. That old man has been dead weight for years. Sarah's too sentimental to see it, but he's just taking up space. Once I get the inheritance, I'll convince her to put him in a home. Hell, maybe I'll even help him along with a little accident. Heart attacks are so common at his age. I had to stop the recording. The casual way he talked about ending my life, about abandoning my daughter, about destroying everything we held dear, it was beyond evil. This man had sat at our dinner table, had taken our Christmas gifts, had called me Pops while planning to murder me. The recording continued. The beauty of it is that Sarah will never suspect a thing. She thinks I'm working late when I'm with my real family. She thinks those business trips are actually for business. She's so trusting, so naive. It'll break her heart when I leave, but she'll get over it eventually. Maybe she'll even find someone else. Though at 35, her options are getting limited. There were more recordings, each one revealing new depths of Randall's cruelty and manipulation. In one, he talked about how he'd been slowly poisoning Sarah's relationship with me, making comments about my age and declining abilities until she began to see me as a burden rather than her father. In another, he detailed his plans to use the inheritance money to start over with Jennifer, maybe move to California where no one knew about his first family. But the most devastating recording was the last one, where Ophelia confronted him directly about his threats against me. "You can't be serious about hurting Levi," she said. "I'm dead serious," Randall replied. "That old fool is standing between me and $8 million. If making it look like an accident is what it takes, then that's what I'll do. A fall down the stairs, a gas leak, maybe just the wrong medication mixed into his evening pills. Who's going to question it? He's 63. He's been under stress since you got sick. And everyone knows how these things happen to elderly men who live alone." My wife's voice was barely a whisper. "You're talking about murder. I'm talking about problem solving. And if you try to stop me, if you try to warn him or tell Sarah the truth, I'll have you declared incompetent so fast your head will spin. I've been documenting every little mistake you've made since the chemo. Memory problems, confusion, behavioral changes. It's all there. A judge will believe that cancer treatment affected your mind, and I'll be granted power of attorney over both you and Levi. Then you'll both disappear into the state care system, and Sarah will thank me for taking such good care of her aging parents." The recording ended there, but I could hear my wife crying softly in the background. She'd face this monster alone, knowing that one wrong move would doom both of us to whatever twisted fate he'd planned. I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my son-in-law's betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, pure, righteous anger. This man had stolen 15 years of my daughter's life. He'd terrorized my dying wife. He'd planned to murder me for money that wasn't even his to claim. But Ophelia had been smarter than him. She'd played along with his demands while secretly documenting everything. She'd made him believe he'd won while carefully constructing his downfall. And now, armed with her evidence and her love, I was going to finish what she'd started. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Sarah's number appeared on the caller ID. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded strained. "I just wanted to check on you. Are you doing okay with everything?" For a moment, I almost told her everything right then. But I remembered Ophelia's careful planning, her warnings about how Randall might react if cornered. My daughter was still in danger, still living with a man who'd planned to abandon her after stealing millions of dollars. "I'm managing, sweetheart," I said carefully. "Just taking things one day at a time." "Good," she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Dad, I need to ask you something. Randall thinks maybe we should talk about your living situation. He's worried about you being alone in that big house." My jaw clenched. He was already starting phase 2 of his plan, using my grief and isolation to convince Sarah I needed to be warehoused somewhere. "I appreciate the concern," I said evenly, "but I'm not ready to make any big changes yet. I need some time to process everything." There was a pause, then Randall's voice in the background. "Tell him we're here to help him make the right decision." The casual arrogance in his tone made my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "Tell Randall I said thank you for the offer, but I can take care of myself." After hanging up, I looked at the evidence spread across my table. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of destroying the man who'd tried to destroy my family. But tonight, I would mourn the wife who'd loved me enough to sacrifice everything to protect me, and I would prepare for the war she'd started in the shadows of her final days. I spent the next 3 days meticulously studying every piece of evidence Ophelia had gathered, memorizing details and planning my approach. But what I discovered on the 4th day changed everything I thought I knew about my wife's final months. Hidden beneath all the other documents was a small leather journal I'd initially overlooked. Inside, Ophelia had documented not just Randall's threats and schemes, but her own brilliant counter-strategy. Reading her careful notes, I realized that everything, even her apparent betrayal of me in the will, had been calculated to give Randall exactly what he needed to destroy himself. Day 62. One entry read, "Randall is getting impatient. He keeps asking when I'll change the will. I told him I need more time to make it look natural, that sudden changes might raise suspicions with the lawyer. The truth is, I need more time to document his threats. Each conversation gives me more evidence of his true intentions." Another entry made my breath catch. Day 78. I caught Randall going through Levi's medicine cabinet today. He claimed he was looking for aspirin, but I saw him examining Levi's heart medication. Tonight, I'm moving all of Levi's pills to a lockbox in our bedroom. I won't give this monster the chance to hurt my husband. My wife had been protecting me in ways I'd never even realized. While I'd been nursing hurt feelings over her cold behavior, she'd been standing guard over my life every single day. But it was the final entry that revealed the true genius of her plan. Day 91. Tomorrow I'll sign the fake will that leaves everything to Randall. Mr. Henderson thinks I'm making a terrible mistake, but I've sworn him to secrecy about the real will that's locked in our safety deposit box, the one that leaves everything to Levi as it should be. Randall believes the fake will makes him rich, but it actually makes him a thief. The moment he tries to claim money that legally belongs to Levi, he'll be committing fraud, and with all the evidence I've gathered about his bigamy and his threats against us, he'll go to prison for a very long time. I sat back in amazement. Ophelia hadn't just protected me. She'd created an elaborate trap that would spring shut the moment Randall made his move. The $8 million he thought he'd inherited didn't legally belong to him, making any attempt to access it a federal crime, and she'd documented every step of his plan to steal it. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sarah's number again. "Dad, I need to talk to you." Her voice sounded different, strained and worried. "Can I come over? Alone?" Something in her tone made my pulse quicken. "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay? I'll be there in 20 minutes, and Dad, don't tell Randall I called." After she hung up, I quickly gathered all the evidence and locked it safely away. If Sarah was coming alone, if she was asking me to keep secrets from her husband, then maybe Ophelia's plan was already working. Sarah arrived looking haggard, dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd always been meticulous about her appearance, just like her mother, so seeing her this disheveled worried me. "Dad," she said as soon as I closed the door behind her, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Has Randall ever said anything to you about my mother's mental state before she died?" I chose my words carefully. "What kind of things?" "He keeps telling me that Mom was confused in her final months, that she wasn't thinking clearly when she made her will. He says that's why she left you almost nothing, because she was too sick to understand what she was doing." Sarah's voice cracked. "But Dad, I was with Mom almost every day, and she seemed perfectly lucid to me. Sharp as ever, just tired from the treatments." This was it, the opening Ophelia had predicted. In her journal, she'd written, "Sarah will start to question things once Randall begins claiming I was mentally incompetent. My daughter knows me too well to believe I would abandon Levi without a very good reason. Your mother was many things in her final months," I said carefully, "but confused wasn't one of them. If anything, she seemed more focused than ever, like she was trying to accomplish something important." Sarah nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "That's what I thought too. But Randall keeps insisting she wasn't herself, and now he's pushing me to help him access the inheritance money immediately. He says we shouldn't wait for probate to be finalized, that there are ways to get emergency access to the funds." My heart pounded. This was exactly what Ophelia had predicted. Randall would be so eager to claim his stolen fortune that he'd try to bypass normal legal procedures, creating additional evidence of fraud. "Sarah," I said gently, "why are you asking me these questions? Has something happened?" She broke down then, sobbing into her hands like she had as a child. "I think something's wrong, Dad. Really wrong. Randall's been acting strange ever since the will was read. He's been making phone calls at all hours, leaving the house at weird times. And yesterday I found plane tickets to California in his jacket pocket. When I asked him about them, he said they were for a business trip he'd forgotten to mention. Maybe it really is business, I suggested, though we both knew that wasn't what she believed. That's what I thought too, until I saw the names on the tickets. There were 4 tickets, Dad. 4. 2 adult tickets in Randall's name and someone called Jennifer Morrison, and 2 children's tickets for kids named Marcus and Emma Morrison. The room fell silent except for Sarah's quiet crying. She discovered Randall's second family on her own, just as Ophelia had known she would. My wife had understood that Sarah was too smart, too observant to be fooled forever. "Sarah," I said softly, "what do you think those tickets mean?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I think my husband has another family. I think he's been lying to me for years. And I think Mom knew about it." I felt a surge of pride in my daughter's intelligence and strength. Even in her pain, she was putting the pieces together just as her mother had hoped she would. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "If I confront him, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some explanation? But if I'm right," she trailed off, unable to voice the implications. I wanted to tell her everything right then, to show her all of Ophelia's evidence and spare her any more pain. But I remembered my wife's warnings about Randall's dangerous nature when cornered. Sarah needed to discover the truth gradually, safely, in a way that wouldn't put her in danger. "Maybe you should talk to someone," I suggested. "A professional, someone who could help you figure out what these signs mean." She nodded slowly. "I've already called a private investigator. He's going to look into those names on the tickets, see if there's a connection to Randall. That's smart, sweetheart, very smart." As she prepared to leave, Sarah turned back to me. "Dad, I'm sorry about the will, about Mom leaving you so little. It doesn't make sense to me, and if I find out that Randall somehow influenced her decision." She left the threat unfinished, but her meaning was clear. After she left, I sat in my living room feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for Ophelia, who had died carrying the weight of Randall's threats alone. Pride in Sarah, who was showing the same strength and intelligence that had made me fall in love with her mother. And anticipation, because I could feel the walls closing in around Randall. He had no idea that his careful plans were unraveling, that his victims were fighting back, or that his greatest threat wasn't the elderly man he'd planned to murder, but the dying woman who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The trap was closing, just as Ophelia had designed it. And soon, very soon, Randall Morrison would discover that underestimating the women in my family had been the biggest mistake of his life. The private investigator Sarah hired worked faster than either of us expected. Within a week, she had a thick folder of evidence proving what we already suspected. Randall had been living a double life for 7 years. Jennifer Morrison wasn't just his mistress, she was his legal wife, making his marriage to Sarah a complete fraud. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice hollow with shock. "Dad, can you come over? I need to show you something, and I need you here when I confront Randall." I arrived at their house, the house I'd helped them buy 15 years ago with money from my savings, to find Sarah sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by photographs and documents. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. "Look at this," she said, sliding a marriage certificate across the table. "Randall married Jennifer Morrison 2 months before he married me. Dad, I'm not even his real wife. Our entire marriage has been a lie." I sat down heavily beside her, pretending to see the documents for the first time. The private investigator had been thorough. There were photos of Randall's second home, school records for his children, even evidence of joint bank accounts he maintained with Jennifer. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "He's been supporting them financially for years. The money he told me he was investing for our future, he's been spending it on another family. We're broke, Dad. The house is mortgaged to the hilt, our savings are gone, and meanwhile he's been planning to abandon me with $8 million from Mom's will." Before I could respond, we heard the front door open. Randall's voice called out cheerfully, "Sarah, honey, I'm home!" "Sorry I'm late. Client meeting ran over." Sarah and I exchanged glances. She took a deep breath and called back, "We're in the kitchen, Randall. My father's here." He walked in still wearing his fake smile, but I saw it falter when he noticed the documents spread across the table. His eyes darted from Sarah's tear-stained face to the marriage certificate lying in plain view, and I watched as his mask of deceit finally slipped. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice tight. Sarah stood up slowly, holding the marriage certificate. "This is your real marriage certificate, Randall. The one to Jennifer Morrison, dated 2 months before you married me." The color drained from his face. For a moment he said nothing, and I could almost see his mind racing as he tried to find a way out of the trap closing around him. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, but she cut him off. "Explain what? Explain how you've been married to another woman for 7 years? Explain how Marcus and Emma Morrison are your children? Explain how you've been stealing from us to support another family while planning to abandon me with my mother's money?" His expression shifted then, the pretense of caring dropping away entirely. The man who emerged was cold, calculating, the same man whose voice I'd heard on Ophelia's recordings planning my murder. "Fine," he said, straightening his shoulders. "You want the truth? Here it is. Yes, I'm married to Jennifer. Yes, those are my children. And yes, I've been planning to leave you for years. The only reason I stayed this long was because I knew there was money coming eventually." Sarah gasped, but I felt a surge of satisfaction. He was confessing everything, just as Ophelia had predicted he would when cornered. "You're sick," Sarah whispered. Randall laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "I'm practical. You're 35, Sarah. You're not getting any younger, any prettier, any more interesting. Jennifer is 28. She's given me sons, and she doesn't bore me with constant talk about having more children or buying a bigger house." Each word was designed to wound, and I saw Sarah flinch with every cruel syllable. But she stood her ground, stronger than he'd given her credit for. "Get out," she said quietly. "Oh, I'm leaving," Randall replied. "But I'm taking what's mine first. That $8 million your mother left me? I've already started the paperwork to claim it. By tomorrow, I'll have access to the accounts, and by next week, I'll be in California, starting my real life with my real family." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 63 years, but also feeling the strength that comes from righteous anger. "Actually, Randall," I said quietly, "you won't be taking anything." He turned to me with contempt. "Stay out of this, old man. This doesn't concern you." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Oh, but it does concern me. You see, that $8 million was never Ophelia's to give away. It was mine." His confident expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" I opened the envelope and spread the real financial documents across the table. "These are the real investment records, Randall. The money came from my father's inheritance, which Ophelia managed for me over the past 15 years. She never owned it. She just grew it. Every dollar legally belongs to me." His face went white as he stared at the documents. "That's impossible. The will clearly states—" "The will you saw was fake," I continued. "Ophelia knew you were pressuring her to leave everything to you, so she had our lawyer create a false document to satisfy you. The real will leaves everything to me, as it should." Sarah looked between us in confusion. "Dad, how did you know about the fake will?" I pulled out Ophelia's letter and handed it to her. "Your mother left me more than just an old coat, sweetheart. She left me the truth about everything." As Sarah read, her expression shifted from confusion to amazement to fury. When she finished, she looked at Randall with pure disgust. "You threatened to kill my father," she said, her voice deadly calm. "You planned to murder him for money that wasn't even yours to inherit." Randall's composure cracked completely. "You can't prove any of that. It's just the ramblings of a sick woman." I pulled out the digital recorder. "Actually, we can prove it. Ophelia recorded every conversation you had with her over the past 2 months. Would you like to hear yourself planning my murder?" The blood drained from his face as I pressed play. His own voice filled the room, casual and cold as he discussed the various ways he might kill me. Sarah listened in growing horror, her hand over her mouth. When the recording ended, Randall looked like a cornered animal. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare use those recordings. They were made without my consent. They're inadmissible in court." "Maybe," I agreed, "but they're not inadmissible in the court of public opinion. I wonder what your employer would think about these recordings. What Jennifer would think when she discovers you've been planning to murder an elderly man for money. What your children would think when they're old enough to understand." His jaw worked silently as he realized the trap he'd walked into. Every move he'd made, every threat he'd uttered, every cruel plan he'd hatched, all of it had been documented by a woman he'd underestimated. "You want to know the beautiful part?" I continued. "The moment you try to claim that inheritance, you'll be committing fraud. The money legally belongs to me, not you, so not only will you lose everything, you'll go to prison for trying to steal it." Sarah stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulling out something I couldn't see. When she turned around, she was holding a set of keys. "These are the keys to your car," she said, tossing them at Randall's feet. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. And if you ever come near my father or me again, I'll make sure those recordings find their way to every person you care about." Randall looked between us, realizing he'd lost everything. The money, the respect, the carefully constructed lies that had supported his double life. All of it was crashing down around him. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes," I said firmly, "it is. Ophelia made sure of that before she died. You lost this war before you even knew you were fighting it." He picked up his keys with shaking hands and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "You'll regret this. Both of you." Sarah looked at him with the strength I remembered from her childhood, when she'd stood up to playground bullies twice her size. "The only thing I regret," she said, "is wasting 15 years of my life on someone who was never worthy of it." After he left, Sarah and I sat in the sudden silence of her kitchen, processing what had just happened. My daughter, my strong, intelligent daughter, had faced down the man who'd been destroying her life and emerged victorious. "Dad," she said finally, "I'm so sorry for not seeing what he was, for letting him treat you badly, for believing his lies about Mom." I reached over and took her hand. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. He fooled all of us for a long time. But your mother saw through him, and she made sure he'd pay for what he tried to do to our family." Outside, we heard Randall's car start and pull away. As the sound faded, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a weight I'd been carrying since the day of Ophelia's funeral. My wife's final gift hadn't been betrayal or abandonment. It had been justice, served with the patience and precision that only a woman who'd loved us for 40 years could have managed. 6 months later, I stood in the garden behind our old house, the house that now truly belonged to Sarah and me, watching my daughter plant roses in the spot where Ophelia had always dreamed of having a flower garden. The legal battles were over. Randall's threats were empty memories, and for the first time since my wife's death, I felt at peace. The aftermath of that confrontation had unfolded exactly as Ophelia had predicted. Within days of Randall's departure, Sarah filed for divorce, and the private investigator's evidence made it an open and shut case. Randall's bigamy meant their marriage had never been legal, so there was no question of alimony or shared assets. He lost everything: the house, the savings he hadn't already stolen, and most importantly, any claim to respectability. His second family hadn't taken the revelations well either. When Jennifer discovered that Randall had been married to another woman for 15 years, that he'd been planning to abandon Sarah only after stealing $8 million, and that he'd threatened to murder an elderly man, she took their children and moved back to her parents in Oregon. The last we heard, she was seeking full custody and had forbidden Randall from seeing Marcus and Emma. His employer, a prestigious marketing firm that prided itself on ethical practices, terminated him immediately after the recordings became public. Apparently, planning to murder your wife's father for money violated their moral standards clause. He'd been forced to take a menial job in another state, far from both of the families he'd destroyed. But the most satisfying consequence came when he actually tried to claim the inheritance. Despite knowing it was fraud, despite knowing we had evidence of his crimes, his greed overcame his caution. He hired a shady lawyer and attempted to file legal papers claiming the $8 million. The moment those papers were submitted, federal prosecutors charged him with attempted fraud. He was currently serving 18 months in minimum security prison, which gave us all the time we needed to rebuild our lives without looking over our shoulders. "Dad," Sarah called from where she knelt among the rose bushes. "Come look at this." I walked over to find her holding a small metal box tarnished with age. I found it buried right here, under what looks like an old rose bush. There's an inscription. She handed me the box and I read the faded engraving. "For Levi, with all my love. Ophelia, 1983, our first wedding anniversary." I'd completely forgotten about this time capsule we'd buried together, full of young dreams and promises for the future. Inside, we found photos of our early years together, love letters Ophelia had written but never given me, and a list of goals we'd made as newlyweds. Travel to Ireland, buy a bigger house, raise children who know they're loved, grow old together without regrets. At the bottom was a sealed envelope with my name on it, but in recent handwriting, Ophelia's hand from her final months. She must have dug this up and added to it. Sarah whispered. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and found one last letter from my wife. "My darling Levi," it began. "If you're reading this, then my plan worked, and you and Sarah are safe. I'm writing this on what I know will be one of my last good days, and I wanted to leave you something more than just evidence and anger. I wanted to leave you peace. I know these past months have been hard on you. I know my coldness hurt you, and I know you wondered if I'd stopped loving you. But every harsh word, every distant look, every moment I seemed to push you away. It was all to protect you from a monster who wanted to destroy our family. By now you know the truth about Randall, about his other family, about his plans for both of us. You also know that I was never really sick with dementia, never really confused or bitter. I was just a woman fighting for the people she loved most in the world. The $8 million is yours now, as it always should have been. But more than that, Sarah is free. She's free from a man who never deserved her, free to find real love, free to build the life she was always meant to have. And you, my darling, are free from the threat that kept me awake so many nights those final months. I want you to use this money to live fully, travel to Ireland like we always planned, buy that bigger house if you want it, or keep our little home and fill it with grandchildren someday. Help Sarah rebuild her life. Most importantly, don't spend your remaining years grieving for me. I lived 40 beautiful years as your wife. I got to raise a daughter with you, to build a life with you, to love and be loved by the best man I've ever known. That's enough happiness for any lifetime. Now it's time for you to find new happiness, new adventures, new reasons to smile every day. Take Sarah with you on some of those adventures. She needs to remember how to laugh again, how to trust again, how to believe in good people after being married to such evil. And Levi, thank you. Thank you for 40 years of being exactly the man I fell in love with. Thank you for trusting me even when you didn't understand what I was doing. Thank you for being the kind of father who raised a daughter strong enough to fight back when she finally saw the truth. I'm not really gone, you know. I'm in every rose that blooms in this garden, in every family dinner where Sarah smiles, in every moment you remember that you are loved. Death can't touch that kind of love. It's forever. Live well, my darling. Live fully, live happily. And remember that the woman who loved you for 40 years is cheering you on from wherever love goes when it leaves this world. All my love, always and forever, Ophelia. I read the letter twice before the tears made it impossible to continue. Sarah put her arm around my shoulders and we sat together among the roses, crying for the woman who'd saved us both and celebrating the future she'd made possible. That evening, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a travel agency to book 2 tickets to Ireland, one for me and one for Sarah. It was time to fulfill at least one of the dreams Ophelia and I had shared. The second call was to our old pastor, asking if he could recommend a grief counseling group, not because I was drowning in sorrow, but because I wanted to help other people who were struggling with loss. I had learned something valuable about love and sacrifice, and the strength that comes from fighting for your family. Maybe I could help others find their own strength. A year later, Sarah met David, a kind widowed teacher who treated her with the respect and gentleness she deserved. Watching them together reminded me of Ophelia and me in our early years, the way they looked at each other, the way they laughed together, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams for the future. I gave Sarah $2 million as a wedding gift, enough to buy a house and start fresh. The rest of the money I split between investments for my future and donations to causes Ophelia had cared about. Cancer research, domestic violence shelters, and programs for elderly people who'd been abandoned by their families. I kept the old coat, of course. It hangs in my closet now, a reminder of the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, not the money hidden in its lining, but the proof that I was loved completely, unconditionally, and without reservation by a woman who was braver and smarter than I ever knew. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I take out Ophelia's letters and read them again, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. She taught me that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love is fierce, protective, willing to appear cruel in order to save what matters most. Randall had thought he was playing a game against weak, defenseless people. He never understood that he was actually facing Ophelia Morrison, a woman who would go to any lengths to protect her family. He never realized that underestimating the quiet strength of a devoted wife and mother would be his downfall. As I write this, sitting in the garden, Sarah and I planted together, surrounded by roses that bloom brighter every year, I can almost hear Ophelia's voice in the wind. She's telling me she's proud of how everything turned out. proud of Sarah's happiness, proud of my strength in fighting back. And I can hear her laughing, that wonderful laugh I fell in love with 40 years ago, as she contemplates the perfect justice of her plan. The man who tried to steal our family's future ended up with nothing, while the people he meant to destroy inherited not just money, but freedom, peace, and the knowledge that we are capable of protecting what we hold dear. The greatest inheritance Ophelia left me wasn't $8 million. It was the understanding that real love never gives up, never stops fighting, and never ever surrenders to evil. That's a legacy worth more than any fortune, and it's one I'll carry with me for whatever years I have left. In the end, Randall was right about one thing. It really was all about family. He just never understood what that word actually means. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.